Hi, this is Jim Cranston from 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com, the podcast and website about reimagining your life. Thanks for joining me today to get back, to the basics and what our focus is all about. So let's get started. If you like what you hear today, please leave a like, subscribe, tell your friends, send me a message. Tonight, we'll be talking about some of the basics around, why the podcast was really even started and what it is that we're trying to actually happen and what our focus is all about with this. So, first up is the name. And people may remember this, we talked about this a long time ago, but 7 every minute, what does that really mean? At the time we started, that was the rate the baby boomers were retiring. So basically every minute, seven more baby boomers would retire. I mean, every minute, every day, every week, it just went on. It's actually a really big number, and has gotten bigger since then, since when we started. And plus, now we have to add in the Gen Xers, and it's all kind of they're all getting retirement's getting to be a really important piece of the economy. I mean, it always has been for a while, but with the advent of the baby push there after World War II, a lot of the working population got a lot bigger, and so suddenly you had all these people in the workforce, and were always a lot of people in the workforce, and they would age and get out. But at this point, there were a lot of new people in the workforce. They became a major part of the workforce over the years, and now that whole cohort is starting to retire at once, with the Gen Xers retiring right behind us, another large population group. So it really has a big effect on not only the workforce, but the population demographics as a whole. And it makes a difference, and we talk about that and how it has an effect on us personally and on the the laws and the policies that are being set around that. And what our initial focus was basically on Medicare because that was the thing that was most important to me. And at the time, I was getting to that age and started looking into it. And it was just purposely kind of obfuscated. It was really a horrible system. It still is. And we're going to talk about that in kind of a general sense. And we still do a little bit. And but it turns out that Medicaid is really different in every state. So that wasn't a great choice for a podcast because it would mean we need somebody who had expertise that was very specific to each of the different states and territories and such. But looking into that, into the Medicare side of things, then we started talking about money and retirement, and especially for those who aren't especially prepared for retirement, which, by the way, is roughly two-thirds of baby boomers aren't adequately prepared for retirement. So similarly, Gen X is not far behind the baby boomer cohort, with roughly 50% of the people not feeling that they're adequately financially prepared for retirement. So I started interviewing people, asking them about their retirement plans and are they comfortable with money. But a funny thing happened because when I started talking to people to find out, what their biggest financial concerns were related to retirement, many of the people I spoke with, even though they weren't necessarily overly financially prepared for retirement, they also weren't especially concerned about it. I mean, certainly, yes, some were very concerned, some were even frightened, but many were not. And so that led me to realize kind of a deciding factor in the decision between what to do with the podcast was that the difference between those two groups were how they viewed life and their place in life and their views of themselves. And that was a real breakthrough for me and for the podcast because and that was true not only for older adults, but also for people of any age. And that's become one of our basically our core focus on the podcast. That was, when I got my certificate in neuro coaching and started practicing brain priming and envisionment techniques to support all that. And it was also when I started doing the weekly podcast very consistently. Currently, we have, I think, about 265 episodes, including this one, and actually before this one. And I've been pretty consistent in my weekly visits with you all since then. And I really appreciate all of those you who follow me and talk to me and stuff like that. It's actually pretty nice, very considerate. And it's really good. And we do a lot of things. But while this history is interesting, you know, what's in it, and realistically, what exactly is it that we're trying to do and what is it that we're sharing with you? So if there's kind of one overriding message or really kind of an attitude or that comes out over time, I hope it's, it turns out that it's really been that we should have self-respect and faith in ourselves, that we have to understand that you can't always control what the world does, but that you can control how you respond to a situation, that you have the ability to reframe a situation to better align with your life vision. And certainly, it's really important to just never give up. We have an amazing amount of energy, an amazing amount of talent, and don't let the naysayers say, "Oh, don't do that. You're too old. You're too anything. You're too young. Whatever it is, just never give up. Have faith in yourself, and to look for and appreciate the good things that exist in life around us." I know sometimes there's a lot of really big issues, but it's really important that you never lose sight of the good things around us. So I know those things might sound kind of a little hippy dippy optimistic, but we teach you all the ways to actually do those things. And separately, how to have your own brain come naturally to help you along this path and to kind of guide you into the successes that are really important to you in your life. We we don't, we certainly don't shy away from faith in some form, whether it's, some higher source or whether it's nature or a small God or God with a capital G. It's different for everybody. And it may even be that, your source of energy is maybe the collective consciousness of all the things that ever existed in the world, past, present, and future. And it really doesn't, in one sense, it does not matter. The specifics are less important than the realization that the little world that we kind of live in, that we've kind of created for ourselves, is just that. It's something that we've created for ourselves. And the power and the energy that we can do by being aware of all the interaction we have with each other and all the energy we can get from the world is really very important. It makes a huge difference. And it's important to realize that we're about, one part in a very large system. And my perspective, and it's a very strong feeling on my part, is that the system is not out to get us, but to help us, to guide us. Opportunity, it exists for those who seek it and to look for it. It may not be the opportunity that you expected. It may not be the one that you necessarily want. But generally, if you're looking for opportunity, you will find it. To clarify, that doesn't mean that if you just desire something, you can just manifest some amazing thing that will just magically appear. It might, but in the world, your own source or your own reality may take a different path than the one you had expected. It's always beneficial, but it's most beneficial to keep an open mind because sometimes things happen a little bit different than we expect. Okay, but, what is it that I teach? Well, what I teach actually is far less important than what you can accomplish. And what I teach is to show you how to accomplish the things in a fashion, in a manner, to accomplish those things that matter the most to you. There are a few steps to this. Some, none of them are particularly difficult. Well, they're not difficult in the abstract, let's put it that way. But some do require kind of a lot of self-honesty, and that is often a little bit of a challenge for any one of us. Things that, like coming to grips with limiting beliefs that, many limiting beliefs we've had since we've been little children or even infants. They're deeply rooted, and so deeply rooted that our brain is really hesitant to even consider that they might not be correct. And then there's things like the fear of change. This is a well-intentioned, we've talked about this a lot, this is a well-intentioned built-in mechanism to keep us safe. And a good idea, and it really helped a lot when we were surviving in the as primitive humans, because, things were often kind of, we lived around a lot of animals, and those animals wanted to eat us, and some very basic needs, and so those primitive instincts served us very well. But then, as we aged and aged as a race, the whole humanity aged, the world changed. And back in the bad old days, if something traumatic happened, well, we quickly hardwired that into our brain as something to avoid at all costs because it had to do with literally our physical survival. But now, when we're small and something traumatic happens to us, we may have even totally misunderstood the context of it and didn't really understand what was going on, but we still thought it was a really important thing and really hardwired it into our brain as one of those absolutes. This hardwired, can't change it, this is how we're going to live our life. Things like if we stand up for ourselves, well, then we're being kind of unkind to somebody else. Or if we try something new, then we thought we were doing okay before, but if we try something new, it might be too risky and we shouldn't try something new. These are things that in our ancient history really served us very well because we were a very community. If the community didn't work totally tightly together, the community didn't survive. If something was working, we tried something new. We went to a different place to hunt or fish or gather grain or whatever. Might mean that that was a bad place to go and that was the end of us. These days, things are different. And so these hardwired reactions, they're really difficult to both self-discover and even more difficult to change. But with some practice, they can be overcome and they can be changed and they can be reframed and they can be kind of found and replaced with newer guidances that serve us much better as we're older. Finally, we cover how to kind of re-envision your life to be more aligned with how you really want to live your life, how you really envision how you want things to be. That doesn't mean that you can instantly change the state of the whole world, but it does mean that there are steps you can take to clarify your own life vision, do things to create and work and develop goals in a way that are more likely to actually, so you can actually reach them in a timely fashion, and then live your life in a manner that helps you live in a world where basically it's more aligned with your own vision of how the world should be. Imagine, if you will, getting up in the morning kind of refreshed because yesterday was a really good day, and you have plans for today that you just find really kind of invigorating. You're excited about the day, and you have an attitude such that even if your plans change or even if they completely fall through, you'll still get done all the things that are most important to you today. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? This is all possible. And you don't have to be independently wealthy, or you don't have to be number one in your field, or you don't have to have any amazing talents or characteristics except for one. You have to believe in yourself. You have to be willing to make some changes, which might be a bit scary, but you can be confident that you'll be living and moving closer to your own life vision. So next week, we'll talk a bit more about some of the specifics, including some upcoming webinar and challenges and things that we have coming on. But for now, we'll leave it at that and hope you're really pretty excited about some of the things we're going to be talking about and really focusing on. We've been doing it over the past, 5 years, which is how long we've been on, and a little more than that. But it's now, this podcast is going to really focus on those things so that we don't have some episodes and that and episodes and other things. We're really going to move forward and concentrate on that. So I hope you're excited as I am. Again, that's it for the evening. Your homework tonight is to think about one or two changes or accomplishments that you want to make in your life. And they can be big or small, and they might be, might be something that you tried working on before. But once you think of what to do, simply write them down. And I really mean write them down with a pen and paper. Write down the why of you want to make those changes. Now, tonight there's an extra points again. Once you write down those changes, if you write in a paragraph, say, or a few sentences, a paragraph about not only the factual why, but the story around how that why benefits you, or why it's important to you, or important to you and to others, or what other things it would allow you to do. You want to write down a little story, essentially. Basically, what you want to do is write down a little story about your world after you make those changes and how much better it feels. So that's it for the evening. Thank you again. As always, remember there's wars and unrest and political unrest going on in the world. All important. And I forgot to put up UKR7. That's a link to where you can make donations to help the people of Ukraine, things in Ukraine. Totally a mess right now. But if you can and you're able, that's one place you can donate and help the people of Ukraine. And then worldcentralkitchen.org, WCK.org. That's a group, they work throughout the world, usually in disaster areas, and they bring in food and services to people, like I say, typically following a disaster or natural disaster. So remember, as always, we talk about this, there's places, there's these big international organizations, there's organizations overseas, there's also organizations in the US, there's organizations in your neighborhood. All these people can use some attention. And when you work in some place like that, it helps you to understand how people who are less fortunate than you can live. And so that's a nice thing to do. And if you're not in a position where you can either do that, either financially, time-wise, whatever, just something really small, saying hi to somebody, smiling at them as you walk past them in the street, even something as simple as that can make someone's day better in ways that you probably can't even imagine. So if you can and you're able, ukr7.com, wck.org, local organizations, just smile. One of the best ways to care for yourself is to care for others. As always, thank you for stopping by. If you found something useful or interesting, please pass it along. And if please subscribe, of course, and hit that like button. And if you didn't find anything that we talked about tonight or sounded like something, please drop me a comment as to what you'd like to hear, and we'll see if we can fit it in. Have a great week. Remember to live the life that you dreamed of, because that's the path to true contentment. Love and encouragement to everyone. See you next week on 7everyminute.com and 7everyminute the podcast. Bye-bye.